In 2016, I traveled to Morocco for the first time and I spent a month immersing myself in the culture, history, and learning about the experiences of Moroccan women. And it was there that I truly discovered the complex struggles surrounding women's rights in Morocco. The delicate balance between tradition and modernity, the desire for education and economic independence, and women's efforts to reclaim their voices in a rapidly evolving society. It really opened my eyes to a context I wasn't familiar with, and even though 8 years have passed and a lot must have changed, I still think it's important for me to tell this story because the challenges and triumphs of Moroccan women resonate as deeply today as they did back then. And those experiences continue to shape my worldview and remind me of the importance of amplifying unheard voices in society. And so in this video, I want to share with you everything that I learned. None of what I'm going to discuss is just my opinion. All of this is a combination of academic research and stories from the women that I interacted with. One of the highlights of that trip was a field trip to the countryside region of Le House, where a local NGO, High Atlas Foundation, was working to empower women in rural communities. We got to this expansive farmland and we were greeted by a number of women who were working in the fields, and I learned that a lot of these women were divorcees, single mothers, widows who had been ostracized by society, with little or no means to provide for themselves and their families. With the help of High Atlas Foundation, they were able to better their lives by learning a lot of the sustainable agriculture practices and just promote more productivity for themselves and the communities. After meeting with them, they were nice enough to prepare breakfast for us. It was a whole spread of locally sourced ingredients, things that they had actually planted and grown by themselves. After breakfast, we all gathered around the women as they answered our questions and told us their personal stories about what it's like to be a woman in Morocco. As they spoke, our guide translated for us, and even though I couldn't really understand what the women themselves were saying, I could feel the emotion in each and every one of their stories. Sometimes they laughed, you know, those deep, hearty laughs that grandmas have. Sometimes they cried. Other times they would encourage each other and break out into song just to show a moment of solidarity with each other. It was truly beautiful just being involved in this moment and just being able to hear from them and learn from them. But as each woman told her story, I reflected on the common themes that I could find. Themes that I was familiar with from my many readings and observations of Moroccan culture. The women of Morocco have been in constant battle with the cultural traditions and teachings that have seen them struggle to achieve certain rights since the country's independence. There is an overwhelming adherence to traditional gender roles, which stipulate that men belong in the public sphere, working and directly affecting the society, while women belong in the home to serve as good wives and mothers. In the same way, many also believed that men were the best decision makers, and it would serve the woman's best interest not to voice too much of an opinion, but just to obey the man's commands. And so, as you can imagine, any woman who deviates from these norms is often looked down on, and even seen as a threat to the culture. These practices and concepts obviously reinforce the age-old tradition of patriarchy, which manifests itself in so many different ways in society. In Morocco, there's something called the Mudawana, or the family code, which covers all matters related to marriage, divorce, parentage, custody, and inheritance. It is heavily influenced by the country's religion, which is Islam, and so it has served as a moral and social guide for Moroccans for decades. But it has also been criticized as being very patriarchal in the past. And for that reason, the Moroccan parliament was pressured into revising the Mudawana, which gave women more rights than under the original format. One of the ladies we spoke to told us that even though this was a good thing, there's still a lot of challenges because people in society are taking a long time to adjust, particularly in the home setting. In a lot of homes, women are still expected to stay home while the men go out and work. Another woman lamented that marriage is almost an obstacle for women who are looking for a job because the employers are like, why would you need a job when you should be at home taking care of things? And because of that, they would actually go ahead to reject her job application. The woman also said that these sorts of things create a feeling of stagnancy and a lack of purpose, especially in cases where your friend's husband has allowed her to work, but you can't work. So it sort of adds insult to injury. In recent years, the push for women's rights in Morocco has garnered a lot of strength, and women's roles are beginning to evolve. And this is where NGOs have actually played a very significant role. The first two NGOs that were formed after Morocco's independence, the Democratic Association of Moroccan Women and the Female Union Action, gave rise to a lot of other smaller NGOs that were also doing the same thing, combating violence against women, gender-based, legal and cultural discrimination, underrepresentation of women in government and the economic sector, and illiteracy. Since the King of Morocco, Mohammed VI, took power in 1999, he's actually done a decent job to give women more rights. In the year 2000, for the first time in the country's history, the king made great strides by making some very crucial appointments to his cabinet. He appointed the first female royal councillor. He also appointed a woman to head the National Office of Oil Research and Exploration. These crucial political appointments basically made women across the country realize that it was actually okay for them to be involved in the public sphere, and it boosted the feminist movement. One of the sectors helping women move into the public sphere is the microfinance sector. Morocco, like many other countries, is heavily dependent on the informal economy, which is basically a sector of the economy that is not covered by formal arrangements, and businesses are not really subject to government regulation or taxation. Basically, those jobs like people selling things on the street or traders in the market, or even sometimes bus or taxi drivers. Microfinance is key in Morocco because with the loans that are given to clients, the clients are basically able to transition from the informal economy to the formal economy, and that way they're able to take care of themselves and their families. During my time in Morocco, I took a separate visit to this institution called Foundation At-Tawfiq, and we were able to go into the Marrakesh neighborhoods to meet some of their female clients. Meeting with these women just helped me understand how important microfinance actually was in their lives. Many of the women opt for retail businesses, and they use the loans that they get from this organization to rent spaces to conduct their business, or to buy goods that they can sell to people to generate some income, or to buy the materials that they will use to make the goods that they will sell to people. It's not an easy process, and that's why it's so important for them to habitually pay back their loans so that they can get even more funding and they can continue to grow their businesses. I remember one woman that we met, and she was so happy just to show us her shop and how she had grown. It was a very simple, humble shop that she had, but she invited us in, made us sit on her couch, offered us tea, and then she brought all her scarves and all the material that she was selling, showed us everything, and she was so thankful for the foundation giving her the ability to be able to do this business. It was very heartwarming just to see how happy these women were with themselves and how confident they were because they had a legitimate business now and they had customers, and they just felt like their lives had just made a complete turnaround. It was such a special thing to see. And a lot of these women who were reaping the full benefits of this foundation's help were doing so because they were reliable and were paying back their loans. So it shows how important microfinance can be in general, but there are also a lot of challenges as well. Firstly, a lot of women live in the rural areas, and so they don't have this access to these microfinance institutions, which are mostly based in the cities. Secondly, a lot of women don't really have an idea of how this whole microfinance thing works, so they're less likely to actually get involved. Also, in many traditional households, the women haven't worked outside a home, and they don't really know many other skills besides what they're used to doing in the house. In order for these women to actually learn new skills, there is an extensive period of training that is required, and some women are not willing to go through that training, and in a lot of cases many of these microfinance institutions are not properly equipped to facilitate that training. But the good thing is that these challenges have been identified, and so they're well known, and a lot of organizations are actually working to address these issues. So I'm very interested to see how things must have changed or how they will continue to change in the future. One thing that really stuck with me in Morocco is the fact that all the young urban women that I spoke to expressed a desire to work and even own their own businesses someday. At the time, they were all pursuing an education. A lot of them actually said that they wanted to go abroad to continue to study. I also noticed that a lot of them don't really think about marriage too much, which at the time was a shock to me because I didn't expect that would be the case. They were more concerned about their education and their future careers. And they saw marriage more as something that could happen in the distant future, but wasn't something that was on the cards for any time soon. One of the young women I spoke to was literally like, why on earth would I want to get married and just become a housewife, not do anything? I actually want to work and earn my own money instead of relying on my husband's money. Which was actually pretty funny, because when I asked her about marriage and all this stuff, she looked at me like I was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? So I was like, okay. I was very happy to just learn a different perspective. But interestingly enough, even though a lot of these young women were not really concerned about marriage, I think they still admitted that it was something that society expected them to do. It was almost as though they had to strike this balance and just accept that this was something that will still happen in the future. The mentality for young women in rural areas might be different in the sense that they don't really focus too much about their professional careers. But it's important to remember that it is the women in the cities who have more opportunities to apply for jobs and have more of an independent mindset about women's issues, which is seen as a very Western and in some cases even undesirable way of thinking for conservatives. Despite many inequalities between men and women, women are increasingly becoming involved in multiple spheres of Moroccan life. There are still challenges though, in the sense that a lot of traditionalists maintain that women belong in the house, the women's rate of unemployment being much higher than men's, and women having restricted access to land and bank loans. Ultimately, the traditional and conservative Moroccan society can't be overturned, but it is encouraging that women are increasingly finding themselves able to reconcile social and traditional expectations with the ongoing fight for women's empowerment. Speaking with and learning from all the women I engaged with in the fields and in the cities was such a priceless experience. I honestly will never forget the strength and bravery of a lot of these women and how far they've come from the different circumstances. And I'm so grateful that in spite of their struggles, they were still gracious enough to just educate me and share their stories with me. I'm still inspired by the positive mindset that they had, this attitude that God will take care of everything. Until today, I find myself still drawing strength from their attitude and their grace. So this is everything I wanted to share with you about that experience. Obviously, it is not a complete story about Moroccan history or women's empowerment. This is a very short, abridged version just based on my experience there. But as I mentioned earlier, everything I discussed was what I read or heard directly from Moroccan sources. So I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something new from it. I would also love to hear your perspectives on this, so please feel free to engage in the comments section. Also, I am super excited to share that I will be going back to Morocco to bring you some more interesting stories. So if you're interested in that, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on your post notifications so that you don't miss any of those. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.